Marcus Webb didn't look up when the laughter started. He'd learned years ago that invisibility was a survival skill, especially when you wore a grey custodial uniform in a building where everyone else wore suits that cost more than his monthly rent. The boardroom on the 43rd floor of the Ashford Technologies Tower gleamed under recessed lighting. Marcus had cleaned this room every night for the past 11 months. He knew the precise angle of each Herman Miller chair, could identify which executives left coffee rings on the Brazilian walnut table, recognized the faint scent of expensive cologne that lingered long after meetings ended. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, the quarterly investor gala had run late, and he'd been called up early to refresh the coffee station before the final presentation. He was replacing the spent coffee grounds when Richard Ashford's voice cut through the ambient conversation, that particular tone wealthy men use when they're about to say something they find amusing. "Gentlemen, let me propose something entertaining before we wrap up." Ashford stood at the head of the table, 62 years old, silver-haired, wearing a watch that cost more than Marcus's car. "I've been reading about cognitive bias, about how we make assumptions based on appearance rather than capability. So here's a little experiment." Marcus felt the attention in the room shift, though subtly. He continued his work, careful to make no unnecessary sound. "Our custodian here," Ashford gestured toward Marcus without looking directly at him, "has been invisible to us all night. We've discussed quarterly projections, market strategies, complex algorithmic trading patterns, all while he's been present, which made me think we assume certain intellectual capabilities based on occupation, don't we?" Several board members chuckled. Marcus's hands stilled for just a fraction of a second on the coffee carafe. "So here's my proposition," Ashford continued, warming to his theme. "I'm going to present a logic puzzle. Nothing too complex. Something my daughter solved when she was at Princeton. If our friend here can solve it, I'll personally write him a check for $10,000. Hell, I'll bow to him right here in front of all of you." More laughter. "But if he can't, and let's be honest about the probability, he has to admit that maybe, just maybe, some of us earned our positions through more than luck." The room had gone quiet, except for a few nervous laughs. Marcus felt heat creeping up his neck, but his face remained impassive. He'd perfected that mask long ago. "Richard, is this really—" one of the board members started. "Oh, come on, Peterson. It's all in good fun. Besides, $10,000. That's serious money for someone in his position. I'm being generous." Ashford finally looked directly at Marcus. "What do you say? Want to try your hand at a little puzzle? No pressure. You can say no." The way he said it made refusal impossible. Every eye in the room was on Marcus now. He could feel the weight of their expectations, their assumptions, their barely concealed amusement. He knew what they saw. A 42-year-old black man in a custodial uniform, grey threading through his close-cropped hair, calluses on his hands from years of manual labor. Marcus set down the coffee carafe with deliberate care. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "What's the puzzle?" Ashford's smile widened. "Excellent. Here it is. You have 2 ropes, each of which takes exactly 1 hour to burn from one end to the other. However, the ropes burn unevenly. Some sections burn faster, some slower. You have no way of knowing which sections burn at which rate. Using only these 2 ropes and a lighter, how do you measure exactly 45 minutes? The silence that followed was different from before. The board members shifted in their seats, some pulling out phones, others leaning back with crossed arms. Marcus recognized the puzzle. He'd encountered variations of it years ago in another life. He stood completely still, his expression unchanged. 5 seconds passed. 10. 15. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. Someone coughed. Another person whispered something. Ashford's smile began to look strained. caught between triumph and something else, perhaps a flicker of doubt, or maybe embarrassment at his own cruelty. "Take your time," Ashford said, but his tone suggested the opposite. Marcus's silence continued. 20 seconds. 30. He wasn't thinking about the puzzle. He'd known the answer the moment Ashford finished speaking. He was thinking about something else entirely. He was thinking about the last time he'd stood in a room like this, wearing a different kind of uniform. He was thinking about the choice he'd made 11 months ago when he'd walked into the HR office of Ashford Technologies and applied for a custodial position despite being overqualified for jobs 3 levels above it. He was thinking about his daughter, Simone, and the promise he'd made to her. 45 seconds of absolute silence. The discomfort in the room had become palpable. Board members were exchanging glances. Ashford's smile had faded entirely. "Look, if you don't know, you can just—" Ashford began. "Light the first rope at both ends simultaneously," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Light the second rope at one end only. When the first rope burns out completely, exactly 30 minutes will have passed, because it's burning from both ends. At that moment, light the other end of the second rope. It has 30 minutes of burn time remaining, but now it's burning from both ends, so it will take exactly 15 minutes to burn out completely. 30 minutes plus 15 minutes equals 45 minutes. The silence that followed was different than any that had come before. It was the silence of recalculation, of assumptions shattering, of comfortable worldviews suddenly becoming uncertain. Marcus met Ashford's eyes for the first time. "Will that be a personal check, Mr. Ashford, or should I expect a wire transfer?" Richard Ashford's face had gone pale, then red. No one in the room was laughing now. The investor seated to Ashford's right, an elderly woman named Catherine Brennan, who'd built her fortune in pharmaceuticals, leaned forward with undisguised interest. "How long did that take you to work out?" she asked Marcus directly. "I knew the answer when he finished asking the question," Marcus replied. "The silence was me deciding whether to answer." "Deciding?" Ashford's voice had lost its joviality. "What the hell does that mean?" Marcus picked up the coffee carafe again, returning to his work. "It means I've spent 11 months being invisible in this building, Mr. Ashford. I've learned things about this company, about the people who run it, about decisions being made in rooms like this one, and I was deciding whether tonight was the night I stopped being invisible. He poured fresh coffee into the service station, his movements precise and unhurried. "I'll take that check whenever it's convenient. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have 3 more floors to service before my shift ends." Marcus walked to the door with the same measured pace he'd used for nearly a year, but before he left, he paused and turned back. "For what it's worth, Mr. Ashford, your daughter didn't solve this at Princeton. This is a classic puzzle attributed to Archimedes. If she claimed to solve it originally, she was lying to you. But then, you probably didn't fact-check her the way you would someone in a grey uniform." He left the boardroom door open behind him, the sound of his cartwheels echoing down the marble corridor. Behind him, the silence he'd created finally broke as everyone tried to speak at once. Marcus didn't pause. He moved to the next floor, to the next office, continuing the routine he'd maintained for months. But his hands were shaking slightly as he sprayed down the glass conference table on the 42nd floor, and his breath came a little faster. He'd crossed a line tonight. The invisibility that had protected him was gone, and while he wasn't sure exactly what would happen next, he knew with absolute certainty that by tomorrow morning his life at Ashford Technologies would never be the same. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Simone. "Did you remember to take your blood pressure medication?" Marcus smiled despite everything, despite the trembling in his hands and the weight in his chest. He texted back, "Yes, sweetheart, everything's fine. How's the studying going?" Another buzz. "Good." Mom called again. I didn't answer. The smile faded. Marcus looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Seattle skyline, at the lights of the city spreading out below, like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, in a modest apartment in Greenwood, his daughter was preparing for midterms at University of Washington. Somewhere else, in a house he used to own in Magnolia, his ex-wife was probably hosting another dinner party, living the life they'd built together before everything collapsed. He put the phone away and returned to his work. The building was quieter now, most of the gala attendees having left. Just Marcus and the night security guard, Carlos, who nodded at him from the lobby desk when Marcus took his cart to the service elevator. "Big night up there?" Carlos asked. He was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes and a slight accent that spoke of a childhood in Mexico. "You could say that," Marcus replied. "That billionaire guy looked pretty angry when he left. You okay?" Marcus appreciated the concern. Carlos was one of the few people in the building who treated him like a human being from day one. "I'm fine. Might be looking for a new job soon, though." Carlos studied him for a moment. "You know, in all the time you've been here, you've never quite fit this job. I can always tell when someone's running from something or towards something. Never could figure out which one you are." "Maybe both," Marcus said quietly. He worked through the rest of his shift on autopilot, his mind cycling through possibilities. Ashford could fire him, probably would fire him. The $10,000 would help if the man actually paid it, but beyond the immediate consequences, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted tonight. He'd made himself visible, and in doing so, he'd set something in motion that he couldn't take back. At 2:47 a.m., Marcus clocked out. The night air was crisp as he walked to his car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a crack in the windshield. The drive back to his studio apartment in Northgate took 20 minutes at this hour, through empty streets still wet from earlier rain. The apartment was small, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom that barely fit a shower stall. But it was clean, organized, and most importantly, it was his. On the small desk by the window sat a framed photograph. Marcus, younger and wearing a different kind of uniform, standing beside a woman with kind eyes and a little girl missing her front teeth. Better days, different life. He made tea, Earl Grey, a habit from his former existence, and sat at the desk. His laptop was old but functional. He opened it and navigated to a folder he rarely accessed anymore. Inside were files with names like Ashford Q3 Projections, PDF and board meeting notes, September, TXT and merger confidential draft docs. 11 months of invisible work, 11 months of being present in rooms where important decisions were made, where people spoke freely because they didn't consider a custodian worth noticing. 11 months of carefully, methodically documenting everything he saw and heard. Marcus had known this moment would come eventually. He'd just expected to control the timing better. His phone buzzed. An email sent at 3:14 a.m. The sender, Catherine Brennan. "Mr. Webb, I found your personnel file interesting. MIT, dual degree in mathematics and computer science, graduated summa cum laude. 10 years at Redmond Analytics, rising to senior quantitative analyst before an extended medical leave. I'm curious why a man with your credentials is emptying trash cans at Ashford Technologies. I'm also curious what you've learned in 11 months of being invisible. Let's have coffee. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Zeitgeist Coffee on Jackson Street. Come as yourself, not as a custodian. CB." Marcus stared at the email for a long time. Catherine Brennan was the second largest shareholder in Ashford Technologies, a woman known for her ruthless intelligence and her willingness to burn entire companies to the ground if she smelled corruption. He thought about Simone, about the promise he'd made to her. He thought about the life he'd lost and the one he was trying to build. He thought about Richard Ashford's face when the silence had finally broken. At 3:47 a.m., Marcus Webb typed a single word in reply. Yes. Then he closed the laptop and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow the invisible man would have to become visible again, and everything he'd been hiding from, everything he'd been hiding, would finally come to light. Marcus arrived at Zeitgeist Coffee 15 minutes early, wearing clothes he hadn't touched in nearly a year. The charcoal grey suit felt foreign on his shoulders, the fabric too fine, the fit too precise. He'd lost weight during his time as a custodian. The physical labor and stress had carved away the softness he'd accumulated during his years behind a desk. Looking at his reflection in the coffee shop window, he barely recognized himself. Catherine Brennan was already inside, seated at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. She was 71 years old, but carried herself like someone 20 years younger, her white hair cut in a sharp bob, her eyes missing nothing. As Marcus approached, she gestured to the seat across from her without preamble. "You clean up well," she said. "Coffee's already ordered. Black, 2 sugars, based on your pattern at the office." Marcus felt a chill. "You've been watching me." "I've been watching everyone at Ashford Technologies for the past 6 months. You were the only anomaly I couldn't explain." She slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was his personnel file, but not the abbreviated version HR would have. This was everything: his education, his career trajectory, his marriage, his daughter, and most tellingly, the gap. The 18-month period where Marcus Webb had simply disappeared from the professional world. "Medical leave," Catherine read from the file, "but no medical records in your insurance claims. No hospital admissions, no prescriptions, nothing. Then you resurface at a custodial staffing agency, take a significant pay cut, and start cleaning offices at one of Seattle's most successful tech companies." She looked up. "Want to tell me what really happened?" The coffee arrived. Marcus wrapped his hands around the cup, feeling its warmth, buying himself time. Through the window, Seattle was waking up, commuters hurrying past, the morning light reflecting off rain-slicked streets. He'd rehearsed this conversation in his mind 100 times, but now that the moment had arrived, the words felt inadequate. "I had a breakdown," he said finally. "Not the kind that gets you hospitalized, the kind that makes you realize everything you thought you knew about yourself was wrong." Catherine waited, her silence more effective than any question. "I was good at my job at Redmond Analytics. Very good. I built trading algorithms that generated millions in returns. I had a beautiful house, a wife who loved me, a daughter who thought I could do anything. And then I discovered that the algorithms I'd designed were being used for something I hadn't anticipated." Marcus took a sip of coffee, remembering. "Redmond had a subsidiary company I barely knew about. They were using my work to optimize high-frequency trades that manipulated commodity prices in developing markets. Rice prices in Southeast Asia, wheat in East Africa. My beautiful mathematics was helping make food unaffordable for millions of people so a handful of investors could profit from the margins." "And when you found out?" Catherine asked. "I went to my boss, then his boss, then the board. They all told me the same thing. It was legal, it was just business, it was how the market worked. They offered me a raise to stop asking questions." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I refused. I threatened to go public. They reminded me about the NDA I'd signed, the non-compete clause, the fact that I had a mortgage and a family to support." "So you walked away." "I tried to, but they were thorough. They made sure every company in the industry knew I was difficult, unstable, someone who couldn't be trusted with proprietary information. My marriage didn't survive it. My wife, Karen, she couldn't understand why I'd throw away everything we'd built over a moral technicality, as she called it. The divorce was finalized 8 months ago. I got weekends with Simone and an apartment I can barely afford." Catherine leaned back, studying him. "And Ashford Technologies. I needed a job, any job. But I also needed to understand something. Marcus met her eyes. I needed to know if Redmond was an outlier or if this was just how things work everywhere. So I applied for a position where I'd be invisible, where I could see how decisions really get made when people think no one important is watching. And what did you learn? Marcus pulled out his phone and opened a secure folder. That Ashford Technologies is cooking its books. That the quantum computing division you're all so proud of hasn't actually achieved the breakthroughs Richard Ashford claims in his quarterly reports. That the acquisition of Hyperion data last year was based on falsified user engagement metrics. That at least 3 board members are receiving kickbacks from preferred vendors. That the company is approximately 6 months away from an SEC investigation that will destroy everything. He slid the phone across the table. Catherine picked it up, her expression unreadable as she scrolled through the documentation. Minutes passed. The coffee shop filled with morning patrons, conversations creating a bubble of ambient noise around them. "This is thorough," Catherine said finally. "Photographs of documents, audio recordings, time-stamped entries. You've been building a case. I've been trying to understand whether decent companies exist anywhere, or if corruption is just the price of doing business at this level." "And your conclusion?" Marcus took the phone back. "That power protects itself. That the people at the top surround themselves with yes men and fancy offices and the kind of money that insulates them from consequences. That someone like Richard Ashford can humiliate a custodian in front of his board because he genuinely believes that wealth equals intelligence, that position equals worth. You hate him." "I pity him," Marcus corrected. "He's built an empire on lies and surrounded himself with people too afraid or too compromised to tell him the truth. Last night, when he couldn't handle being wrong in front of his peers, I saw everything I needed to see about who he really is." Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then, "What do you want, Marcus? And don't tell me justice or revenge or anything abstract. What do you specifically want from this situation?" It was the question Marcus had been asking himself for months. He thought about Simone, about the scholarship money she'd need for grad school. He thought about Karen, about the house they'd lost, about the life that had disintegrated. He thought about the nights he couldn't sleep, haunted by the thought of families going hungry because of equations he'd written. "I want to matter again," he said quietly. "Not because of money or position, but because I'm doing something that helps instead of hurts. I want my daughter to see that her father didn't give up, that he found a way through the darkness. And I want Richard Ashford to understand that the people he considers invisible are the ones who see him most clearly." Catherine nodded slowly. "I'm going to be honest with you, Marcus. I bought into Ashford Technologies 3 years ago because I believed in the technology. But I've had doubts lately, inconsistencies in the reports, evasive answers to direct questions. I've been looking for leverage, for proof, for a reason to force real change." She stood up, gathering her things. "You've given me that proof, but using it will burn everything down. The company will crater. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs. Your ex-wife works in the marketing department. According to your file, she'll be unemployed. The scandal will touch everyone." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He hadn't known Karen had taken a job at Ashford Technologies. The building was massive, thousands of employees. He'd never seen her in his 11 months there. "If you do this," Catherine continued, "you can't do it halfway. Either you walk away and let me handle things quietly, or you commit to seeing it through no matter who gets hurt. But you should know, Richard Ashford has already issued a termination notice for you this morning. He's also threatening legal action, claiming you violated confidentiality by eavesdropping on private business discussions. He's firing me for solving his puzzle. He's firing you for embarrassing him. The legal threat is just spite. It won't hold up. But it means whatever you're going to do, you need to decide now. Because once you leave this coffee shop, your window of opportunity closes. Marcus thought about the folder on his laptop, about the months of invisible documentation. He thought about Simone's text from last night, about Karen's call that his daughter had ignored. He thought about the families halfway around the world whose lives had been disrupted by his algorithms, and about the employees at Ashford Technologies who had no idea their company was built on fraud. "I need to talk to my daughter first," he said. Catherine nodded. "You have 24 hours. After that, I move forward with or without you." She left cash on the table for the coffee and walked out, leaving Marcus alone with his reflection in the window and the weight of an impossible choice. Bam! Marcus drove to the University of Washington campus, navigating the familiar streets by muscle memory. He found Simone in the library, surrounded by organic chemistry textbooks and highlighted notes. She was 20 years old, brilliant, and carried herself with a determination that reminded Marcus painfully of himself at that age. "Dad?" She looked up, surprised. "Aren't you supposed to be sleeping? You work nights." "I quit," Marcus said, sliding into the seat across from her, or was fired. The details are unclear. Simone closed her textbook. She had Karen's eyes, but Marcus's stubborn jaw, and right now she was using both to analyze him with uncomfortable precision. What happened? He told her everything. The puzzle, the silence, the documentation. Catherine Brennan's offer. He left nothing out, not the potential consequences, not the collateral damage, not the fact that her mother would likely lose her job if he moved forward. When he finished, Simone was quiet for a long time. Students moved around them, the library a bubble of hushed concentration and rustling pages. "Do you remember what you told me when you quit Redmond?" she asked finally. "You said that being comfortable wasn't worth being complicit, that you couldn't live with yourself if you kept profiting from other people's suffering." "I remember." "And do you remember how hard that was? How Mom left because she thought you were being selfish and self-righteous, how we had to move, how I had to change schools, how everything fell apart?" Marcus nodded, shame tightening his throat. "Do you remember what I said to you?" Simone continued, her voice soft but firm. "I told you I was proud of you, that I'd rather have a father who did the right thing and struggled than one who did the wrong thing and prospered. And I meant it, Dad. I still mean it. Your mother will be fine. Mom's always fine. She's smart and adaptable and she'll land on her feet. But you've been invisible for almost a year, and I've watched it eat away at you. You come to visit on weekends and you're there, but you're not really there. You're hollow." Marcus blinked against sudden moisture in his eyes. "So here's what I think," Simone said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "I think you already know what you're going to do. You're just scared, which is normal. But you didn't raise me to play it safe, and I'm not going to let you start now." They sat there for a moment, hands linked across scattered textbooks and the accumulated weight of difficult choices. "I might make things harder for you," Marcus said quietly. "If this goes public, if there's a scandal, then I'll deal with it. Dad, I'm in college. I'm studying to be a doctor. I'm going to spend my entire career making hard choices and living with the consequences. Maybe it's good practice." Marcus laughed, despite himself, a sound halfway between humor and heartbreak. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," Simone said, "before he started emptying trash cans and hiding from himself." She stood up, gathering her books. "I need to get to class. But Dad, whatever you decide, I'm with you. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Stop being invisible. Whatever else happens, just stop disappearing." Marcus drove back to his apartment with Simone's words echoing in his head. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and looked at the folder of documentation one more time. Months of careful observation, of being present in rooms where people spoke freely because they considered him beneath notice. He thought about Richard Ashford's smile when he'd proposed the puzzle, about the assumption of superiority, about the casual cruelty of using another human being as entertainment. He thought about the employees who would lose their jobs, about the collateral damage of truth. He thought about Simone telling him to stop being invisible. At 4:47 p.m., Marcus Webb sent an email to Catherine Brennan with a single attachment. Every file, every recording, every piece of documentation he'd collected in 11 months of invisible work. The subject line read, "I'm in." Then he closed the laptop and waited for the storm he'd just unleashed. The Seattle Times broke the story 3 days later. The headline was simple but devastating. Ashford Technologies under federal investigation for securities fraud. Whistleblower evidence suggests systemic deception. Marcus watched the news coverage from his apartment, coffee growing cold in his hands. His name wasn't mentioned in the article. Catherine had protected his identity, at least initially, but he knew it was only a matter of time. In the age of social media and aggressive journalism, anonymity was a temporary condition at best. His phone had been ringing constantly since the story dropped. Reporters, lawyers, former colleagues from Redmond Analytics, even a producer from a true crime podcast. He'd ignored them all except for 2 calls, one from Simone checking on him and one from an attorney Catherine had recommended, a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in whistleblower protection. "You did the right thing," Patricia had told him during their initial consultation, "but you need to understand that doing the right thing doesn't make you immune to consequences. Ashford's legal team is already trying to discredit the evidence, and they're going to come after you personally. We need to be prepared." Marcus was learning that preparation was different from readiness. Nothing could truly prepare him for seeing his former workplace become the subject of cable news analysis, or for the images of federal agents carrying boxes out of the Ashford Technologies building, or for the stock price that had plummeted 47% in 2 days. On the 4th day, his phone rang with a number he recognized, Karen. He hesitated, then answered, "Hello, you son of a bitch." Her voice was ice. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Karen, I lost my job, Marcus. They're shutting down entire departments. I have a mortgage, I have bills, and thanks to your little crusade for justice, I'm unemployed. Again. Because of you. Again." Marcus closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." "You're sorry? You're sorry. Do you know what Simone told me when I called her crying? She said you were doing the right thing, that I should be proud of you. Our daughter is defending you while I'm trying to figure out how to make rent. I can help. With what? You're a custodian, Marcus, or you were before you decided to be a hero. How exactly are you going to help me?" The line went dead. Marcus sat in the silence of his apartment, the phone still pressed to his ear, feeling the weight of her anger like a physical thing. He wanted to call her back, to explain, to make her understand. But what could he say? That he'd watched a company defraud investors and felt morally obligated to act? That he'd spent months documenting corruption and couldn't just walk away? That he'd made a choice between being comfortable and being complicit, and he'd chosen the harder path? All of it was true. None of it would pay her bills. The guilt sat heavy in his chest, mixing with the knowledge that he'd do it again. That given the same choice, he'd still send that email to Catherine Brennan. That didn't make him feel better about Karen's suffering, or about the hundreds of other employees now scrambling for new jobs. It just made him tired. The summons came on the 6th day. Not from law enforcement. Those would come later, Patricia assured him, but from the Ashford Technologies Board. Catherine had orchestrated a special session, and she wanted Marcus there. "Are you insane?" Marcus asked her over the phone. "Richard Ashford tried to have me arrested for theft of proprietary information." The charges didn't stick because you didn't steal anything, you observed. And besides, Richard Ashford is no longer in a position to have anyone arrested. As of this morning, he's been removed as CEO pending the federal investigation. The board wants answers, Marcus, and I convinced them that you're the one who can provide them. Convince is an interesting word for what you probably did. Catherine's laugh was sharp. I own enough shares to make suggestions that sound like demands. Be at the building tomorrow at 2 p.m. Wear the suit. And Marcus, this is your chance to stop being invisible by choice. Don't waste it. The boardroom on the 43rd floor looked exactly the same as it had that night 11 days ago, when Marcus had stood in a grey uniform and answered an impossible question with silence. Same Brazilian walnut table, same Herman Miller chairs, same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle. But everything else was different. Richard Ashford sat at the far end of the table, no longer at its head. His silver hair looked unkempt, his expensive suit wrinkled. 2 lawyers flanked him like bookends. The rest of the board was present. 10 people in total, representing billions in collective wealth and influence. They all turned when Marcus entered. Catherine sat at the head of the table now, in what had been Ashford's seat. She gestured to an empty chair. Mr. Webb, thank you for coming. I believe you know everyone here, at least in passing. Marcus sat down, acutely aware of the stares. He recognized these people from his months of invisible observation. Peterson, who left coffee rings. Harrison, who took calls from his mistress during meetings. Yamamoto, who actually read the reports instead of just skimming them. Each of them had revealed themselves in small ways during the months when they thought no one was watching. Let's be direct, Catherine began. The federal investigation is ongoing, but the preliminary findings suggest that Mr. Ashford has been systematically misrepresenting the company's technological capabilities and financial health for at least 3 years. The evidence provided by Mr. Webb has been corroborated by forensic accountants and is, unfortunately, damning. Ashford's lawyer leaned forward. My client maintains that any discrepancies in reporting were the result of overly optimistic projections, not intentional fraud. Your client, Catherine interrupted, presented fake demos of quantum computing breakthroughs to this board and to investors. Your client inflated user engagement numbers for Hyperion data by a factor of 3. Your client has been moving money through shell companies to hide losses in the R&D division. These are not optimistic projections. These are crimes. The room fell silent. Marcus watched Ashford's face cycle through emotions: anger, fear, desperate calculation. I want to know, Harrison spoke up, how a custodian managed to document all of this without anyone noticing. You want to know how? Marcus heard himself say. All eyes turned to him. I'll tell you how. Because you didn't see me as a person. For 11 months I was in and out of offices, conference rooms, executive bathrooms. I was present during sensitive conversations around confidential documents, in spaces where important decisions were made. And not once did any of you consider that I might be listening. Not once did you think to guard your words, or secure your papers, or check if the cleaning staff had a higher security clearance than access to trash cans. He stood up, feeling something unclenching in his chest. Richard Ashford made a joke about assumptions based on appearance, about how we attribute intelligence to people based on their occupation. He was right, but not in the way he thought. You all assumed that a man in a grey uniform couldn't possibly understand your complex business dealings, couldn't possibly be educated enough or smart enough to recognize what I was seeing. And what were you seeing? Yamamoto asked quietly. A company built on ego and lies. A CEO who surrounded himself with yes-men and fired anyone who questioned him. Board members who were either too intimidated or too compromised to push back. A culture where appearance mattered more than substance, where quarterly reports mattered more than truth. Marcus pulled out a folder, not the complete documentation, but a summary he'd prepared with Patricia's help. He placed it on the table. This is what I saw. A senior vice president taking kickbacks from a data vendor in exchange for an exclusive contract. A chief technology officer who knew the quantum computing demos were fake, but stayed silent to protect his stock options. A CFO who restructured debt to hide it from quarterly reports. And a CEO who orchestrated all of it while maintaining the image of a visionary leader. He looked directly at Ashford. You asked me to solve a puzzle that night. You treated it like a game, like you were granting me an opportunity. But the real puzzle was figuring out how an intelligent person could be so blind to their own corruption. How someone who'd built something remarkable could let ego and greed poison it until there was nothing left but lies. Ashford's face had gone from red to pale. You have no idea what it takes to run a company like this. The pressure, the competition, the investors demanding growth every quarter. I know exactly what it takes, Marcus interrupted. I worked at Redmond Analytics. I built algorithms that generated millions in profit. I know the pressure to produce results, to show growth, to make the numbers work no matter what. And I know what it's like to choose integrity over comfort. That's a choice you stopped making a long time ago. The silence that followed was absolute. Catherine finally broke it. The board is voting this afternoon on several measures. First, Richard Ashford's immediate termination as CEO and removal from the board. Second, full cooperation with the federal investigation. Third, an independent audit of all company operations and finances. And fourth, the creation of an ethics oversight committee with real authority to investigate and report misconduct. She looked at Marcus. We'd like you to chair that committee. Marcus felt the room tilt. What? You have a unique perspective on this company, Catherine said. You've seen how it operates at every level. You have the education and experience to understand the technical and financial aspects. And you've demonstrated a willingness to sacrifice your own comfort for what's right. Those are rare qualities. I'm not qualified to... You're more qualified than anyone else in this room, Yamamoto interjected. You proved that 11 days ago when you stood there and solved a puzzle while we all waited for you to fail. Marcus looked around the table. Some faces showed skepticism, others calculation. Peterson was actively hostile. But several board members were nodding, including Harrison and two others Marcus recognized from his files as being relatively clean. This is absurd, Ashford finally said. You're going to put a custodian in charge of ethics oversight. Do you hear yourselves? He's not a custodian, Catherine said coldly. He's a mathematician with a degree from MIT who chose to clean offices so he could document your fraud. And yes, Richard, we're putting him in a position of authority because he's earned it, something you clearly never did. The vote happened quickly. Ashford was removed 9-1, with only his lawyer attempting to object. The other measures passed with similar margins. Throughout it all, Marcus sat in stunned silence, trying to process what was happening. When the meeting adjourned, Catherine pulled him aside. You don't have to accept the position, but you should know that if this company is going to survive the scandal, it needs someone credible leading the ethics reformation. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated. That's you. I have no idea how to run an ethics committee. Neither did Richard Ashford, which is why he never created one. You'll learn. And Marcus, you won't be invisible anymore. You'll be very visible, which comes with its own challenges. Think about whether you're ready for that. Marcus left the building as the sun was setting, painting the Seattle skyline in shades of orange and purple. He walked instead of driving, needing the movement, the cold air, the rhythm of steps on pavement. His phone buzzed. A text from Simone. Mum told me about her job. Are you okay? He texted back, not sure yet. Can I come by tomorrow? always. Another text, this one from a number he didn't recognize. This is Patricia Chen. The board's offer is legitimate, but we need to discuss terms and protections before you accept. Call me. Marcus kept walking. He thought about Karen's anger, about the jobs lost, about the comfortable invisibility he'd sacrificed. He thought about Richard Ashford's face when the puzzle was solved, and about the moment he'd decided to speak instead of staying silent. He thought about Simone telling him to stop disappearing. Somewhere in the city, federal agents were building a case. Somewhere, employees were updating their resumes and questioning their futures. Somewhere, Richard Ashford was probably meeting with his lawyers, strategizing his defense. And somewhere, Marcus Webb was trying to figure out who he was now that he was visible again. The weight of being seen was different than he'd expected. Not lighter or heavier, just different. Every choice mattered now. Every word would be scrutinized. The luxury of anonymity was gone. He stopped at a viewpoint overlooking Elliott Bay, watching ferries cross dark water under a deepening sky. His phone rang. Karen again. He almost didn't answer, but then thought about Simone's words about courage. Hello. I shouldn't have said those things. Karen's voice was different now, tired instead of angry. I was scared and I lashed out. I'm sorry. You had every right to be angry. Maybe, but Simone told me what happened in that boardroom. About the puzzle, about you being offered a position. Is it true? They want me to chair an ethics oversight committee. A long pause. Are you going to do it? I don't know yet. It means staying visible, dealing with media attention, probably making more enemies. It means not being able to hide anymore. Marcus, Karen said softly, you were never good at hiding anyway. Even when you were invisible, you were still you. Stubborn and principled and willing to burn everything down for what you thought was right. That's why I fell in love with you. It's also why I left. I know. But maybe, she hesitated, maybe the world needs more people willing to burn things down when they're built on lies, even if it's inconvenient, even if it hurts. They talked for a while longer, finding something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but wasn't anger either. When they hung up, Marcus felt a small knot in his chest loosen. He walked back to his car as streetlights flickered on across the city. Tomorrow, he'd call Patricia Chen and discuss the terms of the ethics committee position. Tomorrow, he'd start figuring out how to be visible in a way that mattered. Tomorrow, he'd begin the work of helping rebuild something honest from the wreckage of comfortable lies. But tonight, Marcus Webb stood at the edge of Elliott Bay and allowed himself to simply be, not invisible, not hiding, not running from himself or toward some impossible redemption. Just a man who'd made difficult choices and was learning to live with their consequences. The water was dark and restless, the city lights reflected in its surface like scattered stars. And for the first time in nearly 2 years, Marcus felt like he could breathe. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, Marcus Webb sat in an office on the 40th floor of the Ashford Technologies building, the same building where he'd once pushed a custodial cart, now working from a space with his name on the door. The view hadn't changed. Seattle sprawled below, the Space Needle rising in the distance, Elliott Bay glittering in the afternoon sun. But everything else was different. The Ethics Oversight Committee had been established with unprecedented authority. Marcus had fought for that, fought to ensure it wasn't just another toothless corporate gesture. The committee could investigate any department, review any decision, and report directly to the board without executive interference. It had taken weeks of negotiation with Patricia Chen's help, but they'd built something with actual teeth. Using those teeth had made him unpopular. Marcus looked at the latest batch of complaints on his desk. An engineering manager who'd been fired for falsifying testing data was threatening a lawsuit. A senior developer who'd been reprimanded for harassment was claiming the committee had exceeded its authority. A vendor who'd lost their contract after Marcus discovered kickback schemes was spreading rumors that he was on a personal vendetta. "They're not entirely wrong about the vendetta part," came a voice from the door. Marcus looked up to find Catherine Brennan standing there, impeccably dressed as always. "I thought your board meeting wasn't until 3. It got moved, which gives me time to check in on our ethics czar." She settled into the chair across from his desk. "You look tired." "I am tired." "Good. The moment you stop being tired is the moment you've stopped caring." Catherine leaned back, studying him. "I've been reading your quarterly report. You've initiated 47 investigations in 6 months, resulted in 12 terminations, and saved the company approximately $8 million in prevented fraud and waste. The board is impressed." "The board is nervous," Marcus corrected. "Half of them think I'm going to investigate them next." "Are you?" "Only if they give me a reason to." Catherine smiled. "That's what I like about you, Marcus. You're consistent. Speaking of which, I have news you might find interesting. The federal investigation wrapped up last week. Richard Ashford is being formally charged with securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. He's looking at 10 to 15 years if convicted." Marcus felt something complicated twist in his chest. "How's he handling it?" "Badly. He's trying to negotiate a plea deal, throwing everyone under the bus to reduce his sentence. It's not going well for him." Catherine paused. "Does it bother you, knowing you put him there?" "Every day," Marcus admitted, "but not because I regret it, because I keep thinking about how unnecessary it all was. He had everything, intelligence, resources, opportunities most people never get. And he threw it away because he couldn't separate his self-worth from his company's stock price. You sound like a man who's thought a lot about the mathematics of ego." Marcus smiled faintly. "I've had time to think. Turns out being visible means people want to talk to you. Reporters, documentary filmmakers, business ethics professors. Everyone wants to know about the custodian who brought down a billionaire." "And what do you tell them?" "That I didn't bring down anything. I just stopped pretending I couldn't see what was happening." He looked out at the city. "The hardest part isn't the work or the investigations or even dealing with people who hate me for it. The hardest part is knowing that none of this fixes what I did at Redmond Analytics. Those algorithms are still out there, still being used. Somewhere, people are still suffering because of mathematics I created." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "You know, Marcus, there's a concept in restorative justice about the difference between guilt and responsibility. You can't undo what you did at Redmond, but you can choose how you respond to that knowledge. You've chosen to spend your energy preventing similar harm here. That counts for something. Does it count for the families whose food prices went up? Does it count for the employees here who lost their jobs when the scandal broke?" "No," Catherine said bluntly. "It doesn't erase those harms, but redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about who you choose to be moving forward, and from where I'm sitting, you're choosing to be someone who makes the world slightly less terrible. One investigation at a time, that's not nothing." That evening, Marcus drove to the University of Washington to meet Simone for dinner. She was in her junior year now, thriving despite the chaos that had surrounded her father's very public transformation from custodian to whistleblower to ethics oversight director. They met at a small Thai restaurant near campus, a place they discovered together during one of Marcus's weekend visits in the early days of his invisibility. "You're in the news again," Simone said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Something about firing a vice president?" "He was accepting gifts from contractors in exchange for preferential treatment, textbook corruption. Oui, and he's claiming you're biased because you used to clean his office?" Marcus laughed. despite himself. That's creative, I'll give him that. His lawyers are arguing that I developed a personal grudge during my time as custodial staff. Did you? Honestly, I barely remember him. There were hundreds of executives. Most of them ignored me completely. Marcus paused. Actually, that's not fair. Some people were kind. Carlos, the night security guard, he always asked about my day. There was an HR associate named Maya who held the elevator for me. Small things, but they mattered. Simone studied him over the menu. You seem different lately, more settled maybe. Do I? Dad, 6 months ago you were still apologizing for existing. Now you're firing vice presidents and making billionaires nervous. It's kind of badass. Marcus felt warmth spread through his chest. Your mother would probably disagree with that assessment. Mom's coming around. Did she tell you she's working at a non-profit now? Some clean energy startup. She says it's the first time in years she's actually believed in what her company does. She didn't tell me that. You two should talk more. I know the divorce was hard, but you're not enemies. You're just two people who wanted different things. Simone reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Besides, I think she's proud of you, even if she won't say it directly. She mentioned your work to her friends at book club. Their food arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics: Simone's classes, her research project on infectious disease modeling, her plans for medical school. Marcus listened, grateful for the normalcy, for this pocket of time where he was just a father having dinner with his daughter. But as they were finishing, Simone turned serious. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret it? Any of it? The choices you made at Redmond, the year of being invisible, the whistleblowing, all of it. Marcus thought about the question, really thought about it. I regret the harm my work at Redmond caused. I wish I'd questioned the applications of my algorithms earlier. I regret that your mother and I couldn't find a way through our differences. I regret that my choices created collateral damage for people who didn't deserve it. But I don't regret trying to make things right, even imperfectly. I don't regret the year of being invisible, because it taught me things I needed to learn about power and assumption and the value of really seeing people. And I don't regret speaking up, even though it would have been easier to stay quiet. Simone nodded slowly. Good, because I'm applying to medical schools next year, and I'm writing my personal statement about ethics in medicine. I wanted to quote my father, the guy who cleaned offices so he could document fraud, but only if you actually stand behind what you did. Marcus felt his throat tighten. You're writing about me, Aditya, about the importance of speaking up when you see harm, even when it's inconvenient or scary, about how the Hippocratic Oath says, first, do no harm, but that sometimes you have to actively work to prevent harm, not just avoid causing it. She smiled. You're my primary source. They sat together in comfortable silence. Two people connected by blood and love and the complicated mathematics of trying to be good in a world that doesn't always reward goodness. 3 weeks later, Marcus received an unexpected email. The sender was Dr. James Patterson, former CEO of Redmond Analytics, the man Marcus had gone to when he'd first discovered how his algorithms were being misused. The email was short. I owe you an apology. Can we talk? Marcus stared at the message for a long time. He thought about ignoring it, about deleting it and moving on. But curiosity won out. They met at a coffee shop in Bellevue, neutral territory. Patterson looked older than Marcus remembered, greyer and somehow smaller. He stood when Marcus arrived, extending his hand with visible uncertainty. Thank you for meeting me, Patterson said as they sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Patterson nodded, accepting that. I've been following your work at Ashford Technologies, the ethics committee, the investigations. It's impressive. I'm not here for compliments. No, of course not. Patterson took a breath. I'm here because I owe you the truth. When you came to me about the commodity trading manipulation, I told you it was legal, that it was just business. But that wasn't the whole story. Marcus waited, feeling old anger stir beneath the surface. The truth is, I knew what was happening. I knew the algorithms were being used in ways that hurt people, and I made a choice to prioritize profit over ethics. I told myself it was legal, that someone else would do it if we didn't, that the market was amoral and we were just operating within its rules. All the comfortable lies people tell themselves to avoid accountability. Why are you telling me this now? Because you were right and I was wrong, and it's taken me 5 years to be able to say that out loud. Patterson looked directly at Marcus. You lost your career, your marriage, your financial security, all because you tried to do the right thing and I shut you down. I've been carrying that knowledge around and it's been eating at me. So this is about your guilt? Partly, yes. But also, Patterson pulled out a folder. I've left Redmond. I'm starting a consulting firm focused on ethical AI development and algorithmic accountability. I want to help companies avoid the mistakes we made, the mistakes I allowed to happen, and I'd like you to consider joining me as a partner. Marcus looked at the folder without touching it. You think I'd want to work with you after what happened? I think you're one of the few people in the world who truly understands both the technical complexity of these systems and the ethical implications of their use. I think you've spent the last year proving that you're willing to put your principles above your comfort, and I hope that you might be interested in work that's more proactive than reactive. Not just investigating fraud after it happens, but helping prevent it in the first place. Marcus opened the folder. Inside was a business plan, detailed proposals, letters of interest from potential clients. It was thorough, professional, and represented exactly the kind of work he'd once dreamed of doing. I need to think about it, Marcus said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. Patterson stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Marcus, what you did, walking away from Redmond, documenting the fraud at Ashford, building something meaningful from the wreckage, it forced me to look at my own choices. You probably don't care about my redemption arc, and you shouldn't, but I wanted you to know that your integrity had ripple effects you might not have realized. After Patterson left, Marcus sat alone with the business plan, feeling the weight of another impossible choice. The work at Ashford was important but exhausting. Every day was a battle against institutional inertia and people who resented being held accountable. The consulting opportunity offered something different, a chance to build preventative systems instead of just exposing broken ones. But it also meant working with the man who'd helped destroy his career 5 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. That weekend, Marcus took Simone hiking in the Cascades, something they'd done regularly when she was younger. The trail was steep, winding through old-growth forest before opening onto a vista overlooking mountain ranges stretching to the horizon. They sat on a rocky outcrop, sharing water and trail mix. Patterson offered me a job, Marcus said. Simone raised an eyebrow. The guy who screwed you over at Redmond. The same. He wants to start an ethical AI consulting firm. He wants me as a partner. And you're considering it. I'm trying to decide if working with someone who failed me before is pragmatic or stupid. Marcus looked out at the mountains. Catherine says it's an opportunity to have broader impact. Patricia thinks it's a mistake to trust someone who's already proven himself untrustworthy. Your mother, I haven't told her yet, but she'd probably say I'm overthinking it. What do you think? I think people can change. I think Patterson seems genuinely remorseful. But I also think remorse doesn't erase harm. And I'm not sure if partnering with him would be forgiveness or foolishness. Simone was quiet for a moment, watching an eagle circle in the distance. You know what I learned in my bioethics class? That perfect solutions rarely exist in complex situations, that sometimes you have to choose between imperfect options and live with the ambiguity. Very philosophical, Dr. Webb. She smiled. I'm not a doctor yet, but I am your daughter, which means I've inherited your tendency to overthink moral decisions. So here's what I think. You're not obligated to forgive Patterson or make his redemption easier. Marcus decides that meaningful work can be separated from personal distrust, choosing to collaborate with others under strict ethical boundaries. He co-founds a modest consulting firm focused on ethical AI and algorithmic accountability, taking on clients concerned about bias and manipulation. While continuing part-time work on an ethics committee, Marcus becomes involved in a federal investigation into high-frequency trading practices tied to his former employer. His testimony and evidence help shape new regulations, preventing future harm, even if past damage cannot be undone. Those responsible for unethical practices face legal consequences, while Marcus's personal life slowly stabilizes. His daughter succeeds, his co-parenting relationship improves, and his professional partnership matures into one based on respect rather than trust. Over time, Marcus learns that integrity brings both criticism and purpose, and that redemption is not about erasing the past, but choosing better actions going forward. Ultimately, Marcus reflects that the real challenge was never a technical puzzle, but the moral choice between silence and speaking up. By choosing visibility and uncomfortable integrity over complicity, he finds a sense of wholeness, not hap.